Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, my fellow web developers and web developer enthusiasts. Today, we're going to show you the fascinating world of the 3D web. Specifically, I'm going to show you how to build a 3D website as a product portfolio in 3D. It's going to be in the format of an immersive virtual world. This will allow you to showcase products, images, and really quite anything and any information in quite interesting ways. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to want to use is React 3 Fiber, which is a React renderer for Three.JS. And then we're going to want to use SpacesVR. SpacesVR is a package that is seeking to standardize some 3D UI and UX components. The reason we're going to want to use SpacesVR is because when you build a 3D website, there are many different layers that are involved. Specifically, we have the camera layer, which is how you perceive the sort of website. In this case, we have the camera set to first-person player, which is also currently the only format right now that SpacesVR has standardized and what we're focusing on at the moment. We also have the environment layer, which is what you actually perceive and see within the experience. We also have the control layer, which is how you navigate the experience. Then we also have interactions. As you can see right now, I'm actually navigating this on my computer. I'm using WASD and arrow keys to move. Let me just demonstrate you one more thing about SpacesVR and what I mean by how it can be a little bit difficult to build these type of websites. So how do you navigate a virtual world or a 3D website on your phone? You don't have keyboards. Well, SpacesVR has taken care of that for you. Oops, I think it crashed, so let me just start that up again. So now if I refresh, you should now see what the control schema looks like. And you'll see right here that we have joystick controls being added, and that is exactly how you're going to navigate, how your users are going to navigate websites, or at least this type of website, on their phone, which is quite nice. So we've handled that edge case for you. Additionally, any experiences and websites that you build on top of SpacesVR will be ported over to WebXR, which means that you can access this website in a VR headset, which maybe that would be quite fun and useful one day. So how do we make a website that looks like this? Let's show you. You're going to want to head over to this link right here, which is the SpacesVR starter repo. You're going to want to clone the repo. I would also just quickly read through this as well. This repo installs TypeScript for you as well as ESLint. It also has React 3 Fiber already, which is what SpacesVR is built on top of. We also give you a starter world, as well as some example components that will help with your education. This is what the starter world looks like, by the way, the code for it. And if you have installed and cloned a repo correctly, you should see an environment that looks like this, right here. The first thing I'm going to show you about SpacesVR, by the way, is this component right here, standard reality. I'll show you what our documentation says about it. So the standard reality has several props: the environment props, physics props, player props, network props, and disable ground prop. So these are all things that you can modify to actually modify the fundamental nature of the experience. Right now, I'm just using all the default values at the moment. Additionally, under this player props layer, I'm not going to cover this today, or at least I'm not going to implement it today, but I do want to highlight it. Under this player props, you can adjust the spawn point, which you do by the position and the rotation. You can also change the player speed, which is how fast the camera moves around. And then you can also enable or disable gyroscope controls, which I find to be quite useful on mobile. What is gyroscope controls? Well, you can enable this and then you can load the experience on your phone. And you can actually tilt your phone camera or your phone, and that will be one way you can navigate the website, which can be quite interesting. All right, let's get started. So immediately you'll probably see some errors because of ESLint. These aren't actually errors, and the way I'm just going to remove these errors is by pasting this rule right here, which will tell ESLint to ignore those errors because they're not really errors. I'm not sure if I'm using an outdated version of ESLint. So if you do see that error, just use this comment, but you may not see it yourself. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but if you do, just in case, just copy and paste what I've added to line 1. Additionally, you're going to want to create a public folder within the repository right here. And then in this public folder, you're going to want to add the 3D models or any assets that you're going to work with. In this case today, we're going to be working with 2 models. The product model, which is the scooter that you saw earlier. And then also the room itself, which is called VR Showcase glassfix.glb. In general, you're probably not going to want to host the models, at least locally, within your dev environment. That's because oftentimes 3D models can be quite large. And whenever you're pushing to GitHub, for example, it's going to take a while for it to actually push. So I would typically recommend actually hosting your models in an S3 bucket on AWS or a service similar to that. One more thing, I'm going to show you a useful tool called GLTF report. If you go to this website, gltf.report, you can actually upload models to it. And it's going to render the models exactly how it will render in your project, because this is a Three.JS model renderer. And this can be very useful, especially when you're debugging models and problems with your models. Let's say a mesh doesn't look quite right, or if your model is very unperformant, or if you want to see which textures are being loaded in, you can use this website right here to see what's going on. And we will make more tutorials on how to optimize your models and make them performant for the web in the future, but I'm just going to quickly introduce this website right now for you to check out on your own at the moment. All right, so let's get started building out our project. Our goal is to make something that looks like this, as you see right here. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're just going to delete everything, almost everything. The only thing we're going to want to leave is just, let's leave ambient light, as well as that transparent floor. So now if we go back to our project or to the world, it should be empty. Perfect. All right, step 1, import the base model. The base model being the room itself. The way you're going to want to do that, import the model component from SpacesVR. And then we're going to add the file itself by using this prop source. Then we're going to type in our file name. So now if I turn around, you'll see that a model has been added and is quite large. So we're going to have to scale it down. We're also probably going to have to reposition it as well as rotate it. Before we continue, let's check out what the model prop offers, or the model component offers. You'll notice right here that the model component will actually handle Suspense, KTX2, Draco, and Meshop. These are all tools that you can use to compress and make models run quicker on the web, which is very important if you want to make your website accessible to every single device, especially low-end devices. So we kind of took care of that for you, which is quite nice. So now let's go back to our model and let's adjust the scale and position. So let's add the scale prop. We're going to scale down to 0.007. Now I'll show you what that looks like right now. So it should look something like this. All right, it's much better in scale. Now the rotation is in right. We're going to fix that by adjusting the rotation on the x-axis. Then we're going to make the value be math.pi divided by 2. Make sure you add that negative in front, by the way. Now we'll flip the model. Now if we enter it, you'll see it actually looks like the room we saw earlier. The issue is right now is that this transparent floor is covering the model a little bit. So let's adjust the model and increase the position of the model on the y-axis just by a teeny bit. We'll do that by making position -y equal to 0.01. So now if we go back into the world we're working on, everything should look nice and tight. Cool. Now it's time to add in our second model. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to use that model component. This time we're going to use product, GLB as a source. It's also going to need some scale and rotation. As you see here, it's also really big. So now let's scale that down. We're going to scale that down to 0.01, and then we're going to make the position. By the way, we want to position it. My goal is to position that model directly over this pedestal right here, as centered as possible. So I'm going to set the x-axis, which is the first argument, to 0.05. I'm going to set the y-axis, which is the second argument, 0.7. And then finally, I'm going to set the z-axis to 0.01. Now if I save it and I go back to my world, it'll be right in the middle of this pedestal. All right. Looks pretty centered to me. Maybe you can do a better job on your own and adjust the z-axis a little bit more. But that's a good start. So, what's the next thing we should do? Well, you'll notice a couple things with this build we have right here is that this model has a very, very, very slight floating animation to it. Additionally, the overall environment looks a lot brighter. So there's a couple things I want to point out. Let's talk about lighting first. You notice right here that we have some lights that actually came in with the base model. Those lights and shadows were actually baked into the model. Baking means that the lights and the shadows were actually included in the texture that was a part of the model. The reason why we want to bake in lights and shadows oftentimes in models is because rendering real-time shadows and lighting sometimes can add some performance issues and make it a little bit more difficult to load on low-end devices. So in the spirit of accessibility, we have baked in lights and shadows into this base model right here. As you'll also notice in this world right here that the overall environment's a lot brighter. Let's increase that brightness. The way we're going to do that is go to ambient light. We're going to set the intensity to maybe 4. So now if we go back here, it's going to be brighter. I think that looks a lot better. You'll notice though that the glass looks pretty weird, and that is because there's no sky right now and it's just completely black, and we have a transparent window. So let's fix that. The way we're going to fix that is we're going to use a sky that's actually built within React Refiber, specifically this helper library called Dre. You can go to this link to learn more about it. Let's go check out the sky component right now. Here are some of the props for it. So the way we're going to add the sky, so we're going to import sky component from React 3 fiber. I think it's just called React 3 actually. React 3-3/Dre like so. And we're going to add that sky component into world. So now everything's going to be even brighter because we have that nice lovely blue sky. You'll notice that the sun is positioned here by default. Just for the sake of this build, I want the sun to be positioned directly above us, kind of like noontime. The way I'm going to do that, so I'm going to go to sun, I believe, let me just double check something. It's called sun position. And we're going to set that y-axis, which again is that middle argument right here, to 1. I think it's, let's see what I did here. Let's check again. Copy that. I think I might have misspelled. Oh, wow, I just had a brain fart. I added the prop to the wrong component. You need to add it to the sky component. All right, ignore my mistake. Let's continue. Okay, so now we have the sun. That's really bright, just as the sun should be. You should never look inside the sun. It's not good for your eyes. And it's not good in the virtual world either. And now the sun is shining directly above us. Also, while I'm at it, I'm just going to add some clouds. And I'm also going to use the default clouds that come with Dre as well. Now when I add the clouds, you'll notice that the clouds just spawn in right here, which don't look too great either. I've never seen clouds spawn inside a room before. So let's change the position of those clouds. And let's make them higher. Maybe we'll set it to 15 on the y-axis. Now, if we refresh, okay, so there we go. We got some nice clouds, which is a little bit more realistic. And you can kind of see it through the transparency of the window. Right now, let's go back to our product model. Let's make this a little bit more flashy. So we can actually add some basic animations to this model. SpacesVR provides 2 animations out of the box. We provide a spin animation as well as a float animation. And the way you're going to do that, so you're going to take the model you want to apply the animation to. You're going to wrap that component with the respective animation component. Today we're going to use the floating component. And now let's just see what the default look like. All right, so now it's floating. As you can see right here, it's kind of going into the panel a little bit. So the floating component comes with 2 props, specifically a height and a speed. So let's just adjust the height. The height dictates how high we want it to float. Maybe like 0.3. Speed, let's make it a little bit faster. Let's do 1.5. Then let's also increase the height of that product model a little bit, maybe like 0.8. Give us some more space. And now if we go to the project we're working on right now, you'll see it's loading a little bit faster, but it's still diving into this component. So I think what I want to do now is to just decrease that float height maybe to 0.1. And now it's a little bit more subtle. All right, cool. I like the look of this. So now we've pretty much built out the base environment of the demo that I wanted to show you. But there's actually one more crucial layer that we haven't really worked with, which is interactions. This is a pretty static environment right now, but we'll probably want to allow our end visitors to do something engaging on the website. What we have in front of us, by the way, with this cursor is a raycaster. And that's pretty useful because we can actually take this interactable component that's also built in SpacesVR. And then, just like the floating component, we can wrap the model component with this interactable component, similar to the floating component like I mentioned earlier. And then we can adjust this prop, this on-click prop, and then add a little function to it. In this case, we're just going to do something really dumb and simple. We're going to make it open up to a link. The interactable component, by the way, has some other props, as well as an onHovered prop and unhovered prop. So this could be really, really useful. For example, if I were to build an elevator, for example, and I had a model that was a switch, and when I clicked on the switch, I can actually write a function that moves the elevator up and down based off of my clicks. And it's really easy. All I need to do is just use the interactable component and it will turn any model into something a visitor can interact with. And then you can just write your function and pass it through the onClick prop or the onHover prop or unhover prop, whatever fits your use case. So now let's test it out. If I click on a model, it links out to Muse. As you know, probably know already if you've been watching this channel, Muse is a no-code editor to build websites as immersive virtual worlds. And unsurprisingly, it's actually been built completely on SpacesVR and React 3 Fiber, which is why I'm showing you this right now. The reason why I'm also showing you Muse at this very moment is because you're probably wondering, how did I get those position, rotation, and scale values? Well, the old way to do it was that you'd kind of have to guess the values, but you can actually go into Muse. Specifically, you can go into a world that looks pretty similar to that starter world that we instantiated through that SpacesVR starter repo. And we can actually add our models into this world and create our environment. We can create our environment as we please. And then you can also see we already have the spin component and the float component added here as well. And as you change the position, the rotation, and perhaps the scale, you'll see we give you the values for you. So all you need to do now is just copy and paste these values and go back to your editor. Just paste them right in. This will greatly expedite the time it takes for you to position and build your existing environment. So that's a quick little hack for you. Other than that, that pretty much concludes our tutorial for today. Let's go back to the final build. Oh, before we do finish, there is one problem. Right now, when we spawn right in the middle. I'm going to use this opportunity to show you how we can change the spawn point. The way we're going to go do that is that we're going to go to standard reality. And let's look at our docs for review. Scroll up. So the standard reality takes in this player props right here. And specifically, if we go to the player props type, you'll see we have position, rotation, speed, as well as controls, which I kind of reviewed earlier. So all we're going to want to do now is change that position. We're just going to move the player back just a tad bit. So now, if I refresh the page, we are now positioned right in view of the product. And there you have it. Hopefully this was a pretty easy and simple introduction to building a 3D website. And I hope you enjoyed this demo of building a website as an immersive virtual world for product showcases. You can build all sorts of websites, by the way. You can build mini games, you can build online stores, galleries, different type of activations, really cool shaders. You can build all sorts of things. So I'm excited to see what you build. Also excited to continue helping you learn about this new medium. I believe the 3D web is quite exciting and offers a really interesting creative outlet for a lot of us web developers who are normally accustomed and used to building within a 2D canvas, which sometimes can feel a little bit restrictive and a little bit boring at times. So be sure to check in and give this channel a follow, because we will be posting more of these educational content on how to build 3D websites and in general, like interesting web experiences. If you enjoyed this tutorial, leave some comments and some feedback. If you have any questions, I will respond as soon as I see it. And all assets, repo, and links will be included in the description below. So be sure to check that out. Cheers and have fun building. Bye-bye.